Before Xbox and PlayStation, before Nintendo and Sega, there was a rivalry in video games that started it all. A ruthless battle with no pulled punches and millions of dollars at stake. A war for supremacy in the world of video games. In the beginning, there was the Atari 2600 versus Mattel's Intellivision. Die-hard Atari fans wouldn't be caught dead with that silly-looking number pad and disc in their hands. And the Intellivision faithful refused to use a controller with only one button. Well, unless you had a friend that had one. But that was only to gain intel on the enemy. But seriously though, Intellivision was one of the first real alternatives to the Atari 2600. And it was the first real rivalry in the world of video games. I myself, being an Atari guy, had never even touched an Intellivision. Until now. In this video, I'm going to document my first experience with Intellivision, as a lifelong Atari fan, and see if I missed out on something great, or if I was right to stick with my preferred gaming company. But first, please don't forget to leave a like on the video if you like it, and subscribe for more content just like this. I cover everything Atari related, so hit the bell icon to be notified whenever we upload. This helps the channel a ton, and when we reach 5,200 subscribers, we will be doing yet another giveaway. And you don't want to miss out on that. Okay, back to the video. It was recently announced that Atari had finally bought its competition in Intellivision. Atari owns the property now, and has the option to release Intellivision classics, update the properties with new titles, and even license out the brand. So now, as a lifelong Atari fan, I can finally try the Intellivision without feeling dirty. Well, without feeling too dirty, I guess. Good friend of the channel and retro tech guru, OGHUGO of OGHUGO's Retro Mod Shop, sent me an AV modded Intellivision 2, along with some extra goodies for us to use and look at on the channel. Be sure to check out Hugo's stuff. I'll have a link in the description. The console itself is actually pretty compact, and doesn't look bad with the controllers resting in their slots. But it gets kinda, well, ugly when you pull them out to play, at least in my opinion. And man, are these controllers weird. The Intellivision was first released to the masses in 1979, and that's a time where there was no set industry defaults for things like controllers. Mattel, and especially Atari, were innovating and trying different things as they went along. But man, like I said, these controllers feel like a bad choice. There isn't a great way to hold them in my opinion, and the disc is more confusing than intuitive. I don't know if you're supposed to kinda circle your thumb around the disc or push it in on the sides, depending which direction you want to go in. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. There are 4 fire buttons, 2 on each side of this thing, and they're kinda mushy and difficult to find and push in, just by feel alone. I don't know if the original model Intellivision has the same controller design or not, but this one just isn't great in my opinion, and I doubt I even have to explain why the number pad is such a bad idea. Mattel, well, they were trying to be innovative, and, well, they really were, I guess, but the design is just lacking. There is a ton of buttons on the controller, and compared to Atari's single-button joysticks and paddles of this time, it had to have felt like a major step forward. But I can't help but prefer Atari's aesthetic overall, even beyond the controllers. The wood grain and black designs, with the big levers, is just iconic looking. But I think some people will prefer the Intellivision. No accounting for taste, I guess. What's really odd in the Intellivision design to me, however, is the cartridge port being located on the side. It just seems like weird placement and makes it hard to reach if you have a lot of consoles crammed together under a TV stand. But looks aren't everything, and it's the games where Intellivision always claimed to have Atari beat. Isn't that right, George?
Hey! Mr. Intellivision.
Plimpton.
I bet it's great doing all those Intellivision commercials. I bet you get to keep all the games. Me and my friends like Night Stalker the best. The bats are real scary.
Here, your friends won't have this new one. Lock and Chase.
They won't believe this. Would you autograph it for me?
Certainly. What's your name?
My name?
I've been making more comparisons between Mattel Electronics Intellivision and Atari. Different games, but the same results. Look at Atari Basketball and Intellivision. I think Intellivision plays much more like real basketball.
I think it's easier to tell the differences by comparing titles that appear on both consoles. And Magic seemed to release most of their games on the 2600 and Intellivision, but it's pretty evident to me that the Intellivision versions were superior. Demon Attack feels like a completely different game. I think I prefer the look of the 2600 version, if I'm honest, but it's cool having the Earth in the background on the Intellivision and the added mothership scene. And it doesn't control horribly, even with the cruddy controller on the Intellivision. Pitfall is pretty similar on both consoles if you ask me, but I think I'll always prefer the 2600 version. But you can't go wrong either way. And Atlantis on the Intellivision seems superior to me as well. But the controller, well, it's a huge detriment when playing this game. I think I prefer the 2600 version for gameplay, but the Intellivision, well, it looks superior. The biggest win for the Intellivision has to be the Pac-Man port. This version is night and day superior to the 2600 one. As we all know, the 2600 Pac-Man has been talked about to death due to its poor graphics, execution, and the fact that it's just an overall poor man's version of the game. With the Intellivision version of Pac-Man, the title character moves and turns with the maze as you would expect, and there is no flickering to keep everything on the screen. Plus, it actually controls fairly well. Heck, it even has the iconic intermission screens. Oh, and did I mention that at the beginning of the game, when you boot it up, there's a big Atari logo front and center. This is just mind-boggling to me as a lifelong Atari fan. But I guess when it comes down to it, both the 2600 and Intellivision have their advantages. So you could have superior visuals and deeper gameplay on the Intellivision, or you could have superior controls and controllers on the 2600. And I think I would go with the console with better controls and controllers myself, but again, I'm an Atari fanboy, so what else can I say? The Intellivision claimed to have superior versions of similar games to the 2600, but they also claim to have superior sports titles and exclusive titles. I don't want to look at sports titles today, but there is no doubting that visually, the Intellivision presented better in that category. I'd rather spend this time looking at the exclusive games on the Intellivision. The console library is a fair bit smaller than the 2600, so it must have good exclusives to make it worthwhile. And there are a few that interest me, so let's dig into them. I've always been a fan of horror, things like Universal Monsters and Halloween in general, so Dracula is a game that I always wanted to play. And it's pretty charming when I started playing it, but it didn't hold my attention as well as I would have liked. It's another Magic game, and one that I want to venture into a bit deeper later down the road. It's also one that I don't think could have been pulled off very well on the 2600. Ladybug was also on the ColecoVision, but it never made an appearance on Atari consoles. Well, not during the retail life of the Atari consoles. And Ladybug is a pretty fun game. It has elements of Drelbs and maybe even Clu Clu Land if you're familiar with those titles. It's easy to pick up and understand, but can also be very challenging to master. I like it. Boxing is one sports game I did try, and I do like the large fighters on the screen. They also seem to make good use of the number pad in the gameplay, which is nice. Other games seem to relegate the number pad for mostly making menu and gameplay options. However, I think I still prefer the boxing games on the 2600, but this one is no slouch, and I'd like to try it with a friend, if I ever get one. Worm Womper is the last game I want to talk about, and I'll be honest, I only tried it because of the cover art. The cover art is that old farmer and his wife drawing that I think is pretty famous and recognizable. And I figured it would maybe be like Whack-A-Mole or something, but it's actually something like a predecessor to Plants vs. Zombies. Well, kinda. It reminds me of that game quite a bit. You play as a farmer with the pesticide gun, and you have to shoot all the worms and bugs before they reach and devour your crops. And it's actually really fun and decent to control on the Intellivision. I ended up enjoying this title the most out of the few I tried for this video, and it was a nice surprise overall. But after having received the Intellivision and trying a few games, what are my feelings on it as a lifelong Atari fanboy? Well, I'm glad I stuck with Atari if I'm honest. The Intellivision isn't bad, and it's definitely superior to the 2600 in a lot of ways. It's clear why Atari felt the need to release the 5200, what with this and the ColecoVision making it look archaic and old. But man, I really hate the controller. Consoles of this era had a hard time figuring out what a controller or joystick should be, especially for home consoles. We ended up having things like the unreliable 5200 controller, the horribly painful to use Proline controllers, and of course, the disc-having monstrosity for the Intellivision. It's hard for me to look past these controllers, and I'll be seeing what I can do in the future to not have to use them so much. But the games on the Intellivision do seem to be superior from what we were used to. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're more fun, just more advanced in most cases, and yes, some are still pretty fun to play. I look forward to exploring the Intellivision library more in the future, especially with Homebrew. OGHUGO turned me on to Intellivision, which is a port of the NES Castlevania, and wow, is this impressive. It really makes me wish somebody would port this game to my beloved 7800. Intellivision actually feels like a Castlevania game, and even controls decent with the stock Intellivision controller. If this is the quality of homebrew that can be found on the Intellivision, well, then I can't wait to further explore what people are working on. And heck, now that Atari owns the rights to the Intellivision, maybe we could get some of these awesome homebrews and cartridges and sold on Atari.com and Amazon. It could happen, but we'll have to wait and see what Atari's intentions are for the Intellivision brand and properties. But these are just my thoughts after spending a little bit of time with the Intellivision, and my opinions on the console. Now I want to hear what all of you think. Do you have an Intellivision, or did you have one growing up? If so, do you enjoy it, or do you think that Atari and Coleco are superior to it? And what are your favorite Intellivision games? Should we do a video comparing 2600 and Intellivision games in the future? Let me know the answers to all this, and more in the comments down below. And please, consider supporting the channel on Patreon and with YouTube memberships. These classy Atarians have done just that, and I couldn't do this without all their support. Thanks to them, the channel can continue to go and grow strong. So, thank you all for the support. And if you want to support the channel, you can head over to patreon.com/7800ProGamer. And thank you once again to OGHUGO of OGHUGO's Retro Mod Shop and eBay store. It's thanks to his generosity that I was able to make this video happen. He also did an HDMI modded Atari Lynx for me, and that works incredibly well. So if you're interested, please check out his stuff and let him know that the Atari Network sent you. Okay guys, that's all for now. I've been the 7800 Pro Gamer, a hardcore Atari fan who is now going to be branded as a trader for life. And I'd like to thank you all for checking out the video. And as always, please remember to stay classy, Atarians.